Hello and welcome to Crime Bytes, the show where we talk about some truly bizarre and disturbing crime cases. My name is Liz and today is True Crime Tuesday. So today we are going to talk about the sin that is the hardest to admit and many of us struggle with it, and that would be pride. Now, when I say pride, what comes to your mind first? I know it was just Pride Month a few months back, so I've heard a lot of happy pride. And of course, it's good, imperative even, to be proud and have pride in who we are and our accomplishments. So why is it on our list today? Let me start with another question. And let's be honest for a second. How many of you think that you could commit the perfect murder? I didn't really, maybe not till that gluttony episode, and I'm still stuck on that. Freaking alcohol as a murder weapon. I mean, I can't do it now, and I wouldn't anyways, but yeah, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people who think that they could get away with a perfect murder, and some of them, I don't want to say anything too negative, but just, no, you couldn't. No. Just no. But how many of you like to try and figure out those murder mysteries? I've always wanted to go to one of those dinners, and that's exactly where we're going to start today's story, at the Winter Haven Holiday Inn on April 14th of 1989. But it's not just any murder mystery dinner. This dinner was hosted and scripted by a man who had an IQ in the top 2%. That would be fun to try and solve, no? I would love to go to something like that. This dinner was being thrown by the Alturas, Florida Mensa chapter. Mensa is an organization that brings people of high intelligence together. Your IQ has to be within the top 2% to join. So the topic of this particular dinner, Murder Mystery Weekend, featured 4 stories, but we're going to kind of focus in on one of them in particular today. This one combined threats, poison, and voodoo. When a death threat appears on the doorstep, prudent people throw out all their food and watch what they eat. Hardly anyone dies from magic. Most items on the doorstep are just a neighbor's way of saying, "I don't like you. Move or else." What do you think about that plot? Now we're going to look at 3 key people in this Mensa chapter. First, let's meet George Trepal and Dianna Carr. George was born in 1949 in New York City to a policeman and an elementary school teacher. He would attend Clemson University in South Carolina, where he would study chemistry for 2 years before ultimately graduating with a degree in psychology. While he was in school, he was known to party, and he was specifically drawn to hallucinogens, which is all well and good, I guess, if you choose to take them, but he decided to branch out and start revenge drugging people with them as well. And at one point he thought that people were breaking into his dorm, so he started coating his dorm room handle with hallucinogenics that apparently could be absorbed through the skin. Then he would lace Oreos with hallucinogens and pick up random hitchhikers with his friends and feed them to the hitchhikers. And then they would kind of get off on just watching the hitchhiker freak out and then just leave them in random locations, which is pretty cruel. Then 3 years after he graduates from college, George gets arrested straight up Breaking Bad style. He gets busted for running one of the largest meth labs in the Southeast at that time. He would do 3 years for this. He worked from home then as a freelance computer programmer, but it's said that there wasn't a whole lot of working happening these days. He had met his wife Dianna at a local Mensa meeting, and she was working full-time as an orthopedic surgeon. The third person we're going to meet is Sherry Gwynn, who was also a newer Mensa member. She was relocating from Texas to get away from an abusive husband. She would meet George and Dianna at the murder mystery dinner, and George would take an instant liking to her. He kind of found himself taking her under his wing, giving her advice about how to handle her abusive husband, and just being another intelligent person to talk to in this new area. A few months later, Dianna would decide to relocate herself and George to Sebring, Florida to set up a new practice. The couple quickly decided that they would rent their house in Alturas to their new friend Sherry. It seemed perfect as they needed someone that they felt that they could trust. Who better than the sweet new Mensa member who was trying to get back on her feet? Once they had every detail in place, they handed Sherry her set of keys so that she could move in, and the very next day, the crime technicians were literally scrubbing the house. Inside of a workbench in the garage, they found a brown vial, and the vial ended up testing positive for thallium. And what's thallium, you ask? First, let's meet George's neighbors. They had not been having the best few months themselves, and that would actually be an understatement. So the neighbors weren't on the best of terms either. I guess things had really escalated between them when Carr, who was of no relation to Dianna Carr, George's wife. Anyhow, Pi was attempting to convert the space above the garage into an apartment for his and his wife's daughters, but because he didn't properly secure whatever permits he needed first, George reported him because he didn't like the idea of them already. He hated how loud the family was. They were a large blended family, and they were out on the countryside. That's how I was raised, and parents do that so that the kids can run around, be outdoors, kind of be loud. I think these kids had four-wheelers, which are cool as well, but they're also extremely loud, and George would hate it whenever the boys would trespass. So yeah, he was that kind of neighbor. I've been there. I've had great neighbors now, thankfully, but my previous one, an example would be I would be out at the pool and she would scream out of her window, "When are you moving?" while I'm trying to relax with my 9-year-old son. Some people are literally bent on being miserable, and there's not much you can do about it, I guess. Just don't let that be you. Then in July of 1988, the Carrs would receive an interesting letter. It was typed out on a Post-it note, first of all, and it read, "You and your so-called family have 2 weeks to move out of Florida forever, or else you will all die. This is no joke." Now, knowing what we know now or are about to find out, this is extremely significant, but at the time, Pi's wife Peggy was the only one who was a little worried and wanted to go to the police. But Pi thought it was just a joke, and he shrugged it off, shoved it into a kitchen drawer. And after a while, everyone forgot about it. So yeah, I know it would be embarrassing maybe to go to the police with something like this and have it turn out to be nothing, but it's important for two reasons. The first is that they have to make a report, and don't let them make you feel bad about it either. Most of them won't, I really hope, but they do have to write it up and file it up at the very least. And that way, if something else does happen, they have it, all that information just right there on file, and then they can just run with it. Even if nothing ends up happening, it could help them if like it's an ongoing problem with other people and you don't even know, and I don't know, you could maybe actually stop whoever is creating whatever problem is at hand. Wow, whole side tangent there. But yeah, that is something I think you should bring to the police unless you know for sure it's a prank. It's a death threat. At least after hearing this case, I think you might agree. So in October of 1988, Dianna would come over on another one of their routine noise complaints. I can't even imagine. So any of you all behave like this with your neighbors or have neighbors behave like this way? I mean, there is an over the top, but there are ways to live with or around most things too, I think. Most things. I don't know. But Dianna came over screaming because the music was too loud. And Peggy refused to back down. Dianna scurried away, yelling, "You won't get away with this!" 2 days later, Peggy and her daughter were at work when Peggy started to feel ill. She had some chest pains, and her arms, legs, hands, and feet were all in pain. She would go home and rest, but the pain would only get worse, and she would start vomiting and got to the point where she couldn't take it anymore. She was brought to the hospital where she said that she felt like she was literally on fire. So they did a bunch of tests and they found nothing. I think you can kind of see where this is going. The doctors became suspicious that Peggy had been poisoned with thallium nitrate after doing a whole bunch of tests. They had this one doctor who kind of had a light bulb. Thallium is both tasteless and odorless and was once used as a pest control here in the United States, but was discontinued after there were some accidental and some not so accidental deaths that were caused by it. They ran some tests, and sure enough, Peggy had over 20,000 times the amount of thallium that should be in your system. Her son and her stepson were also brought into the hospital because they were experiencing similar symptoms. The boys had significantly less thallium in their systems, and Peggy's son would stay in the hospital for 2 months before making a recovery, and Pi's son would take 6 months in the hospital to recover. Oh man. After the week I just spent in one, my hospital staff was great, but it's not home and it's not easy. Those poor boys. And even worse, Peggy would succumb to her poisoning on March 3rd of 1989, the whole time just asking why. Why would someone do this to her? To them, really. Pi was looked at because their marriage wasn't perfect, but he was ruled out quickly. I mean, one of his own sons had almost died, and everyone in the house had low levels of thallium poisoning in their systems. So why would he do that? He wouldn't. There weren't a whole bunch of people in the neighborhood to look at either. Altura's had only roughly over 600 people living in it at that time. And where Pi and Peggy were, it was so far out that they really only had one neighbor that they could actually call a neighbor. George Trepal. The FBI was brought in and they worked up a poisoning profile, which these profiles can sometimes do more harm than good, but in this case they are looking at a white male, extremely intelligent and socially demure. There he is. And this is happening. Yep, Georgie George. There you are. Okay. George, we are covered more. Oof. Sorry. Isn't he kind of giving you those Gilbert vibes? I mean, they may have some things in common. And with that being said, let's pause for a quick promotion. Do you like my hoodie? Cases like these get me really riled and make me want to send a message. Don't mess with me. So I really like this Just Strong hoodie, and I popped this bad boy on. It's dark and soft. Sure, I could pop a creep like that straight out of my area if it came down to it, and that makes me happy. But it's also a reflection of inner strength, and it makes me feel good to wear it. So if you like this look and this message, check out juststrong.com. I'll actually have a coupon code for you right in the description. It will give you 10% off your first purchase. So stay strong and go check them out. They've got some really cool workout clothes for you as well. For all you ladies who like to work out or just like that workout look, I do, and I already am planning my next order. All right, let's get back to today's story. But seriously, creepy man vibes are here too, even if this was a poisoning case, and we'll get there. But poisoners want that revenge without that sloppy work, and they're sneaky. But they also like to watch. Then again, they aren't that bold. Anyways, when the police interviewed George, he stumbled through the interview and actually said someone must have wanted them to move out of the neighborhood. This was telling and kind of had the vibe of that anonymous note. And not one other person could think of any reason why anyone would want to do something this insane to the Carr family. George, come on. If this is our top 2%, I am not feeling too confident in our species. But I also kind of want to know if I can get in now. Because really, the police would place him under surveillance, and then after a few months with nothing to go on, an invitation to a Mensa murder mystery hosted by George and Dianna came to light, and they brought in Detective Susan Gorick. And that is how they would gain access to George Trepal's house, because Detective Susan Gorick was in fact Sherry Gwynn, the new Mensa member who was fleeing an abusive husband. Oh, and George's advice to her with how to deal with him? Poison him! Poor Detective Susan had her work cut out for her, and it took almost a year for her to get in with George like that, and then over 3 months while she was living in his creepy house waiting for tests to come back on that vial that they suspected had thallium in it. It gets creepier. Apparently, he had a room with no windows just in his house with some doll and bondage gear in it, and he just brought Detective Gorick there the first time he was entertaining her at his place while she was pretending to be Sherry. Excuse me? This is my dungeon. Told you there was an element of that, but there's no evidence that he really tortured anyone here as of right now. I mean, probably his wife Dianna, but let's put a pin in that thought now, please. Other noteworthy items that were found in George's house included an Agatha Christie novel entitled The Pale Horse, which is about thallium poisoning, as well as his own bottle capper for winemaking purposes. Then they found another room in his house that was basically a light and soundproof dungeon. An actual dungeon that wasn't this room he was showing around. It was hidden so that you had to pull a piece of board in his basement and it would like swing back to reveal a door, a small door. And behind that there was another small area with another small door. And on the outside there was a handle, but not on the inside. And on the inside there was a small room, a platform bed with stirrups attached to it, and some sort of pulley system for people that the detectives suspected was basically a torture room. It was also soundproof. The police would head to George's house in Sebring, and Dianna would literally try to block the door to keep George from getting arrested. I think she kind of flew off a tad at them as well, which never works out well, and it didn't work out well for her. I feel like many of the negative experiences that people have with the police is just not knowing how to interact with them or doing it wrong. I mean, I guess all of them when you put it like that, but I hope you know what I mean. And do you think the story could get any stranger? Let's make it just a little more weird, because at this point, why not, right? When they finally do get in past Dianna, George is standing at the top of his stairs, welcoming them in nothing but some fancy ladies' underwear. Feast on that mental snack while I grab some more coverage here. Anyhow, George was ultimately detained with 15 different things, including first-degree murder, attempted murder, poisoning water or food product tampering. He would receive the death penalty as his sentence. Not pro-death penalty, but Dianna was not charged with anything, and she ended up divorcing George in 1996. And as for George, it's said that he spends the majority of his time reading and just lamenting that there isn't anyone in his prison who's anywhere near his level of education or intellect. Ew. Sir, you got caught. You're clearly not as smart as you think you are. Pride, not my friend. Pride, my creep, pride. I'm thinking he hasn't learned all that much, and he certainly hasn't learned humility. Things that so much intelligence just can't get you. Anyhow, ironically, he's been there for over 32 years, which is quite a long stretch, and he's still there today waiting to be executed and judging everyone's intellect. Apparently, he doesn't have air conditioner either, which struck me because he is in Florida. But oh well, I guess. Douche. And that's gonna do it. But as always, let's end today on a positive note. I saved this little bit for now, but for her bravery and having to fawn or put up with this guy for over a year, Detective Susan Gorick received the International Homicide Investigation Association Awards for Excellence, and she so deserves it. And I hope if she actually wants to be a member of Mensa that she is, because wow, girl. She at least totally had them all fooled and helped solve this insane case. Anyhow, guys, our last one up is lust, and I picked a fun one, kind of, I guess. But we'll see you then. Stay safe, and pride is a great thing in small doses, but don't let it get out of hand. Bye.